Hi, everybody. It's Becky with New Hampshire Audubon. Oh, hi. I'm hoping everybody's there. Hi, it's Becky. I'm back. As usual, if you're there and can see and hear me, please let me know. Everything's working okay. It's good to be back. It's nice to have a sunny day to be back on, too. So, hi, folks. I'm going to see if I can find myself on Facebook. Whoops. Oh, there we go. Okay, see if I can get this working all right. As always, love to hear that things are working okay. And hi, everybody. Let's see. Let me just work with my phone for a second. And, well, we'll get there. Okay. Well, hi. A very, very special thank you to Phil Brown for doing some Facebook Lives while I wasn't able to be here. And I hope you enjoyed some of the images he was able to provide and to show you. He's got a little different setup, and I think it worked great. I even gave you a tour of his feeder setup, so that's pretty nice to have too. All right, hold on for a second. Let me check something. There we go. All right. Okay, hi, Sandy and Linda. Okay, great. So I can now see comments on my phone. So I think we're up and running here. Great. So let me know again if you're able to see and hear me. It's always good to know that things are working. Thanks. So I'll start out with a little bit of a sort of bird migration update. Um, and we'll talk about what's around right now. But as always, feel free to send any questions, make a comment if you've got questions or you've seen something that you want to share. Let us know, and we'll talk about it. Happy to answer any questions. And if you are having a question later, you can always message us on Facebook, or you can send us an email to birdsetc, BIRDSETC @NHAudubon.org. Very happy to answer any questions. Sandy, thank you for letting me know that things are working. Really appreciate that. So let's move forward. So we're starting to settle into our winter birds. There's still a little bit of migration going on with waterfowl. They're still moving through, sort of trickling through at this point as the ponds start to freeze. So, the big lakes and the rivers remain open longer than the small ponds. And the north freezes sooner than the southern part of the state. So we've got waterfowl coming in and being seen on still some of the big lakes and rivers, and of course at the seacoast. And in fact, one of the best places to see a lot of ducks is at Great Bay in New Hampshire on our seacoast area. It's a brackish bay. It's got sort of fresh water and salt water mixing together. And it's a great place for ducks. I was just there last weekend and had hundreds and hundreds of Canada geese, and I think I estimated about 1,800 greater Scaup, which is a duck that it doesn't breed in New Hampshire. It migrates through or winters right on the Great Bay area. We don't see it very often in the saltwater right at the coast, but at Great Bay, it's a big place for them in the wintertime. So if you're looking to see some ducks, I would suggest Great Bay. There's a Great Bay Discovery Center where you can look out, and you probably will want a telescope. You can see some birds with binoculars, but telescope's really helpful. And when I was there, I was looking for ducks and looked over to the right, and there was a snowy owl sitting on one of the piers out into the bay. Um, Snowy owls will feed on ducks. In fact, we see them most often right along the seacoast, and they'll be going after some of the ducks that winter on the ocean water right in the coast there. But this one was at Great Bay. I hadn't seen one at Great Bay before, and no doubt the large number of ducks is what brought that bird there. So that was a real treat to see. Um, for a very strange reason, the ducks weren't very close to the snowy owl, but I did get to see some there. And there are a couple of other viewing places for Great Bay. Adams Point in Durham is another good viewing spot. So waterfowl still trickling through. This is the time to watch for the rare Tundra Swan. We've had a couple of possible reports, actually one confirmed report. Somebody took a picture of two flying over, and somebody else thought they had a couple. Now the Tundra Swan is a white swan. The immatures are kind of brownish. Oh, let me see if I got my book. I'm going to try a fill trick and show you in my book what I'm talking about here. Let's bring up the swans, the Tundra Swans, page 73. Didn't think about this ahead of time, so I didn't prepare it. So here we go. All right, let's see if I can get that so you can see it. Oops, this way. Okay, so the adult is all white and the immature is a little brownish. Now, the common white swan that we have is Mute Swan. It's got that black bill with the orange knob on it. And the immatures are also a little bit brownish and won't have that orange yet. But usually they're hanging out with the adults, so you can look and tell that it's a Mute Swan. The Tundra Swans, they breed farther north in Canada and farther to the west in the whole across the northern part of Canada. And let's see, oh, I should have showed you the map too at the same time. Not used to this new idea yet there. It's kind of small, it might be hard to see, but I'll give it a try. The yellow is where they're most commonly found and they're breeding. And let's see, I got to stand up. Oh, there's the camera. There. Let's see, did that work? Oh, that's, almost. There we go. Okay. So you've got yellow, you see some blue on the two coasts. That's the wintering area. But they're very rare here. And we do see them occasionally, and this is the time to look for them. So if you see a white swan, take a look at it. If you see that black bill with the orange knob, that's the more common Mute Swan. And those are not native to New Hampshire. They're introduced. But Tundra Swan is native, and we all want to know if there's a Tundra Swan around that we could go see. So take a look, and if you don't see that orange knob, black bill, let us know. You can let New Hampshire Audubon know, and birders will be very, very happy to go look for a bird like that. And of course, take a picture. It's always great when you see something that you don't know or is unusual to take a picture of it. It's a great way to document the bird, but it's also a great way to get your questions answered about what it is. And it's been really helpful. You know, New Hampshire Audubon gets a lot of questions about what bird is that? And the rise in digital photography has been really helpful in letting people know what they've seen. And so don't hesitate to take a picture. And it's okay if it's a lousy picture. We can oftentimes still make an identification even from a poor photo. So I see some comments coming in, so let me check and see what we got to talk about here. Hi, Patsy. Hi, David. Candy has a horrible squirrel problem. Oh boy, squirrel problems are hard to deal with. Let's see. And I started making a hole in the house. Oh boy. I'm not so good with squirrel holes in houses. I did in one of my houses, I had a red squirrel. I was looking up at one of the soffit vents on the side of the my attic from the outside, and there's this little face peeking out at me. Red squirrels, and the screening had come off of the vent, and we had to get the squirrels out and replace the screening. Um, so I'm afraid I'm not going to be much help if they're making a hole in your house. That may require a little bit of help with some chicken wire or some other things that'll keep them out. As far as the bird feeders go, I put my feeders on a pole away from the trees and the shrubs and with a predator guard on the pole. There are a couple of different styles of predator guards. One is kind of like forms like a tent, a circular tent around the pole, and the other is like a stovepipe style. And you can get them. And the only trick is that you've got to put that high enough so that the squirrel can't jump from the ground to above the predator guard. And then you've got to put the pole far enough away from shrubs and trees so that the squirrels can't jump to the feeders on the pole. So that's what's worked for me at keeping squirrels from getting to my feeders. They still come underneath the feeders to feed on what's been knocked down to the ground, the seed on the ground. I admit I do put seed on the ground, so the squirrels come in for that anyway, but even when I don't, they still come in and check out underneath my feeders. You could try putting sunflower hearts in your feeder because there's very little waste with those, and the birds tend to eat them as opposed to knocking more of it onto the ground. So not all the birds can eat the whole sunflower seeds. So something like a goldfinch may come to the black oil sunflower seed and they'll kind of pick through until they find one that's small enough for them to crack with their bill, which means you have a lot of sunflower on the ground for the squirrels to feed on. Sunflower hearts, you won't have that problem. And so there may be less on the ground to attract the squirrels. Encouraging a hawk to be around. Of course, that hawk could go after your birds as well. I have not found that a hawk makes any dent in my gray squirrel population. That's what I have here at my house now. So good luck with that. And let's see, is there anything else I can think of? If anybody else has any other great ideas, um, post a comment for Candy and see if we can come up with something else that might be helpful. Some people have talked about putting out seed with capsaicin on it, that hot pepper chemical, but in general, if a squirrel's hungry enough, it will still eat the seed anyway and still be attracted. So I think probably just for you, as you did, move the feeders away, see if you can squirrel proof the feeders, and then see if you can block up the areas where they're trying to make a hole in your house. My guess is we've got a pretty good squirrel population right now because we've got some good pine cone crops. So the young ones that were hatched in the spring are probably surviving very well. So that may be another factor in all of your squirrels around. But you have my sympathies. I think I've got 7 gray squirrels coming into my yard. I'm not happy about it. Last year, I think I had 12, but they haven't started or they haven't gone from my house yet. So hopefully I'm lucky on that. All right, if you have any other questions, don't hesitate to post them in the comments. Again, this is Becky with New Hampshire Audubon. Glad you could join in. Hi to Lisa, Cora, and Erica, Michelle, and David, and anybody else I missed. Patsy, hi. Thanks. Thanks for joining me. I'm very happy to be back. As I always mention, if you can't post a comment now or while I'm doing this live, but are maybe watching the video, you can always send a message on Facebook, or you can email us at birdsetcetera, BIRDSETC @NHAudubon.org. And we have a crew of volunteer naturalists that helps answer questions. And if you have a mystery photo, don't hesitate to send it along to them. So, all right, so I mentioned waterfalls coming through. Keep your eye out for Tundra Swans. I was excited to have a new yard bird for me, which is a clay-colored sparrow. This is a western sparrow. It's kind of a Midwest sparrow that we see every once in a while, maybe a couple of reports in the fall during their fall migration. They're usually going down to the very southern part of Texas, Mexico, and south for the winter. And then they return to breed in the mid part of the state. But every once in a while in the fall, we get a few that sort of drift into the New England area, into New Hampshire. Uh, we didn't have a lot of reports this fall, but I was excited to see one at my yard in the rain the other day. I was on Monday, a big surprise. And so there's still birds coming in and still birds moving around. So even though we're settling for the winter, you can still get unusual birds or just new arrivals that are still coming in from farther north. And Sandy, I see a question from you. Carolina wrens for the first time in a few weeks. Will they stay around during the winter? So Carolina wrens do not migrate, for which I'm very grateful. They actually have a really interesting story because we never used to have Carolina wrens in the state. They were a more southern species. They would be one of those birds that everybody would get excited about if they were seen and people would go searching for. And then they've extended their range northward. I'll have to look up on the Backyard Winter Bird Survey data. I'll do that for next time. I'll make a note when sort of when they started to increase. I know Pam Hunt did an article about that. She's my colleague, and she writes up our annual Backyard Winter Bird Survey summary. And she did an article about Carolina wrens, so I'll look and see when they arrived in various parts because they've been gradually extending their range northward. So we finally had them breeding in the state. I think that was back in the 90s, maybe 1994. So that was an exciting event. And they've gradually extended their range northward, but they're still very rare north of the White Mountains. And you wouldn't find them up in the mountains up high in elevation either. So we do see them more. When they have a good breeding year, then their youngsters will explore for new territories because they are year-round residents. They look and expand into open territories. So I happen to have a couple around my house. I'm so happy. They were actually two males were counter singing, and I love hearing them in my neighborhood. So yes, your Carolina wren is likely to stay around. And Sandy, I'm not quite sure where you are, but if you're in the southern part of the state, um, chances are really good it will survive the winter. As you get farther north, if we have a really severe winter, actually it could happen in the southern part of the state too, but they're more vulnerable the farther north we go to really cold temperatures, particularly extended cold temperatures. And that will knock their population back. And we had an event, it was maybe maybe 5 or 6 winters ago that really knocked back the population because it was a long, very cold stretch in the wintertime. But then they rebounded again and have repopulated those areas. So hopefully yours will make it through the winter and you'll have one around. Now, questions on why the Carolina has expanded its range. We don't really know, but there are a couple of thoughts. One is that we've had milder winters with global warming, and also we have people putting out bird seed, so there is an expanded food source available to them. But even with people putting out birdseed, they're still vulnerable to very cold temperatures. So I hope yours comes around. All right, let's see. And somebody else has got Carolina wrens in Hudson. Yep, Hudson would be a good place to have them. They're relatively common in the sort of Hudson, Nashua, Hollis, all along that border with Massachusetts and New Hampshire. It's a very good area to see them. I do the Nashua Hollis Christmas bird count, and I remember finding one for the first time in my sector of that count, and it was actually the only report for the count in that particular year. Boy, that was a long time ago. I'm going to say maybe 25 years ago. I hate to say it. Could it really be that long ago? But I think it probably was. Um, so that's another thing. I don't know if I could find that data. I might have to look just for fun. That would be fun to share. I'll jot that down too. First one. So enjoy your Carolina wren. They have a call that's really loud, very loud whistle, and it's described as tea kettle, tea kettle, tea kettle, tea kettle, tea kettle, tea kettle. And males will sing back and forth. But it's very distinctive and very loud and very like a clear tone. So listen for it, particularly when we get to springtime. So thank you for that. Phil mentioned a lot that we've got some northern finches coming in. They've been coming through some this fall, some are staying. It's very exciting. These are the birds that typically stay farther north in years when there are good food supplies up north, and they come south when the food supplies in the north are poor. There are things like pine siskins and common redpolls. We've had crossbills around, red and white-winged crossbills. And the latest one is Pine Grosbeak, which is another new yard bird for me. I heard it. They come to fruit, so they haven't been coming to my feeders. I just heard it when I was out in the yard, heard it calling. They have kind of a two-note whistle type call, but it'd be easy to confuse with something like tufted titmouse. So it's not like the Carolina wren that's really loud and yes, I'm here. It's a little harder to spot and listen to, but sometimes they're up in the very tops of the trees calling. But I know Phil talked some about pine grosbeaks. But what I wanted to mention is that these sort of northern birds, including pine grosbeaks, oftentimes come down to the road for grit. So as you're driving around and if you see something come flying up off the road, pay attention because that could be the siskins, could be redpolls. Goldfinch will also do this, but oftentimes goldfinch are in mixed flocks with pine siskins and or redpolls. So you could have all three species flocking together coming down to the road. Crossbills will do this a lot. In fact, I've got a crossbill video on YouTube, on New Hampshire Audubon's YouTube page from back in this fall, if you want to go take a look at it. But it was coming down to a gravel area getting grit. Now, what is grit? Oh, grit's just what it sounds like. It's small little pebbles. And what birds do, birds don't have teeth like we have to sort of chew up the harder bits of food. So even the birds that like crack open a sunflower seed, they get one layer off, but they still have to grind up the inside of the sunflower seed. And they do this with grit in their digestive tract. It's actually in their gizzard. So they have an esophagus like we do, and that esophagus can actually store food in it. And in some birds, I was reading about grit and gizzard, so now you're going to hear about their digestive system because it's kind of fascinating. So birds will eat food, their esophagus will expand to store food. It's not like ours where it's just a passage down to the stomach. They store food in the esophagus. And then in some birds, it's even expanded more into what's called the crop, and they can hold a lot. You can actually sometimes see it bulging. They can hold a lot of food in that crop. but then it goes from the esophagus into sort of their stomach, which is actually made of two, I don't know quite what you'd call it, but it expands into two sort of different sections. And the second section is the gizzard, and that's where the grit is, and the muscles on the side of the gizzard work on the food and the grit to grind it up so that it can be digested and go through the digestive tract. And the stuff that can't go through, like fur and bones, and fish scales, things like that, they spit up in a pellet. So many of you, I'm sure, have seen owl pellets, and that's what that is, the undigestible bits, the stuff that couldn't be broken down by the grit. So these small birds are coming down to get grit. I've been trying to figure out how to put grit out in my yard as an attractant, but I haven't quite figured that out yet. They have grit for chickens, but chickens are a lot bigger than the little tiny birds. So if I figure out a way to do that, I'll let you all know. But the other thing about the fact that birds go for grit is even larger birds like waterfowl will pick up grit, but they tend to go for little bigger pieces, and lead shot can be the perfect size for them. And it's something that contributes to their poisoning. They're not trying to eat the lead shot. They're looking at it. It looks like grit to them. They use it, and then they get lead poisoning. So it's another reason why we are encouraging people not to use lead shot. It's not when the bird itself is shot, it's because there's shot in the environment that then ducks pick up as if it were grit. So let me just check my messages, see if there's any other questions out there. Don't hesitate to post a question or an observation. And hi to other folks who've joined us. Thank you so much. It's Becky with New Hampshire Audubon. Couple other things that I wanted to mention. Let's see, the grit. So you're going to watch for little birds on the side of the road. And I forgot, when you see a flock, slow down, because sometimes those birds, when they're getting the grit, they get hit by cars. They just can't fly up fast enough. So slow down and watch in front of you on the side of the road, particularly when there's snow cover, because the snow cover will cover up other sources of grit away from the roads. And that's when, we sand our roads, perfect size grit for small birds. So there's your tip. Watch for our northern finches on roads going for grit. Slow down so you don't hit them. And then, I mentioned snowy owls. I want to give my usual request, or talk a little bit about disturbance with snowy owls, because people love snowy owls. They are spectacular birds. They're wonderful to see, but they suffer from a lot of disturbance because people try and get too close to them. And when birds get disturbed like that, they may flush, meaning fly, which means they expend energy. They may be too nervous to hunt, or their stress hormones may increase, so that's not good for their health. Some snowy owls have actually flushed and flown into something and been killed. And then when they flush and fly, it can attract like crows and hawks that harass them, and that prevents them from hunting. Now, if this happens once in a while, once in a few days, once in a week, it's not a big deal. But if it happens continually all the time, then you have a cumulative negative effect on them. So we ask people to keep their distance. Now, how do you judge that? Well, first off, if the bird is reacting to you, you're too close. Back up a little. And if it starts staring at you, back up. You've gotten its attention. It is, reacting to you. So back up a little bit. In general, for birds on the ground, 100 feet is a good distance to stay away. A car is a great blind, so if you can stay in the car, that's an excellent thing to do. And the other thing that I just read about was if you are going to approach a bird, approach with the wind in your face, because the owl doesn't want to fly towards you, but it wants to fly into the wind. That's the direction they go. So if you are approaching and the wind's in your face, then if the bird needs to fly, it's going to fly away from you into the wind, the direction it wants to go. But hopefully you won't get close enough. Please try not to get close enough to put it up. The other thing is if people keep a respectful distance and more people get to see the bird. And there's nothing worse than seeing a snowy owl and you're just about to park and go look at it and somebody gets too close and scares it away. So there's your little helpful tip. Please try and help take care of our owls. This is true for any owl species, but snowy owls in particular are subject to some of this more frequent disturbance. We've got articles about that on both the New Hampshire Audubon website and the New Hampshire Bird Records website, where we've got articles about snowy owls and about disturbance and things like that. So I hope you'll visit both of those sites for that. And there's a PDF available on the New Hampshire Audubon website about snowy owl viewing if you want to send it to somebody who might benefit from that information. Okay, hi Scott. Got a question about Pine Grosbeaks. Are there any particular cultivars of fruiting trees that they prefer and any native species? The native species that they like are mountain ash. Crab apples is another favorite of them, but if you'll notice with birds coming to fruit trees, they come to some more quickly than to others. And Matt Tar and others have done a little bit of research on that, and there are certain levels of sugars that are more in some trees than in others, and sometimes those sugars increase only as the winter goes on and there's more freezing, and then so a tree that wasn't as palatable early in the winter will be more palatable later in the winter, or the birds may be more desperate too. But the fruit trees that I have frequently seen pine grosbeaks at, particularly in the southern part of the state, are crab apples. So those are trees to check, especially if you see lots of fruit. And there may be large flocks of robins around too at the same trees. So just keep your eye out for any birds coming to fruit trees. Thanks for that question, Scott. I have one little crabapple tree opposite my house, but they haven't found it yet. All right. And one other thing I wanted to mention today was our feature plant, which is Bunchberry. It's on Facebook. If you haven't seen it, go take a look at it. It's a small, low ground cover, and it likes sort of more shaded wooded areas. So I just sort of started prepping an area where I might be able to transplant some. So I have a well, it's a crabapple tree that doesn't have crabapples on it, but it has great blooms in the spring, and the birds like it in the spring. So underneath it, I put a layer of leaves. I've had grass under it, but it's kind of shady. The grass doesn't do very well, and the roots kind of hump up, so I don't want to mow there. So this fall, I put a layer of leaf mulch around the base of the tree out, maybe, I don't know, 3 feet from the base of the tree all around it. And then in the spring, I'll add a little more leaf mulch and try planting some bunchberry into that same area. There are a couple of other ground covers that also might work well there that are native, and stay tuned. Those will be coming up in some more of our Facebook feature plants, and I'll talk about them when that happens. But that's a really fun plant. it does have berries. There are things like ruffed grouse, which like them, that I will never have in my yard because it's too urban. But white-throated sparrows eat the berries, and I do have white-throated sparrows that are here through the winter usually. They arrive in the fall and then they leave in early spring, actually probably mid-spring, around in April. So I'm thinking, well, maybe the whitethroats would eat some of the bunchberry berries when they come in the fall. So another plant to think about in your yard, the winter is a great time to do some planning uh, and some prep work, even if it's just as simple as putting down mulch. So, alrighty, I think we're about wrapping it up. If you have any last minute questions, go ahead and post them up. I'll stay on for another minute or so. Again, it's Becky with New Hampshire Audubon. If you have comments afterwards, don't hesitate to send a message to Facebook, or you can email us, birds, etc., BIRDS, etc., @nhaudubon.org. And we really do appreciate your support um, to help us continue to bring these kind of programs out to you, and to continue to do our work with the birds, helping the birds and protecting New Hampshire's natural environment for wildlife and for people. So we hope you'll go to our website and make a contribution or become a member. And I really appreciate your support. Thank you. Let's see, there was something else I was going to mention. I have now forgotten what it was. So I think that we will wrap things up for today. Oh, I know what it was. I would love to hear from folks about what time they think is the best time to do Facebook Live, what time of day. And that if you want to weigh in on that, send a comment or post a message or send me an email. My email's on the New Hampshire Audubon website. I'm just really interested in what time of day you'd most like to see the Facebook Live going on. Thanks very much for joining me. Again, thanks to Phil for taking over for a couple of weeks, and he'll be back again to talk about sanctuaries. And thank you all for joining me. We'll see you again. Enjoy the birds.